last of a long journey to define what we're doing in the next year. So today what we're going to do is we're going to come back another level at this question of assessment analysis methods, because obviously to get concrete on the work plan we have to know what types of analyses we may be undertaking. I'd also like to give you something of an orientation of the sort of the types of literature and sources of literature. Yesterday we found that through the themes we probably are going to have slightly different emphases in terms of target populations and probably in terms of analytical methods and assessment methods. So I'd like to give you also an overview of where you can find that information and something about the traditions of the people who are actually researching in those various areas. So in the sense today, this morning, is a combination of an orientation of thinking about resilience and assessment analysis, and also some practical and concrete ideas about how you might go about looking at resilience assessment and analysis in your labs. So really that's the two main goals. And yesterday we talked about some themes. We talked about the theme of conflict, we talked about the theme of urbanization, we talked about the theme of variable environment, and which other one am I missing? Chronic displacement, right? So you can imagine that the resilience literature relating to each of those problems or themes is different, and probably the terminology is different, and probably the disciplines studying and developing both research and assessment methods are different. They will have different terminologies, as I mentioned, different definitions of resilience. The climate change literature, for example, tends to refer to resilience and adaptive capacity almost interchangeably. Okay? So with that said, what it will mean is in each of your labs, as you choose your theme, you'll probably end up with an initial literature review and promising practices review, and we'll talk about promising practices and positive deviance in a few minutes. That you'll probably go through the process of accessing the literature in your area and also the work that has been done in your lab area. And one of the things you'll have to keep in mind there is where are those centers of excellence that you need to access in order to be on top of the resilience assessment analysis methods and literature in your area. So for example, and I typically separate them into centers of excellent practice. For example, in the case of USAID, if you're looking at conflict, you probably want to be accessing the materials in USAID's conflict management mitigation unit. If you're talking about USA food security, for example, which didn't come up here, but I'm sure it's going to come up in many of your lab work activities, that is the Feed the Future initiative now has generated quite a bit of both tools and literature around that topic. If you're looking at conflict in the scholarly literature, you're probably looking at the disciplines of political science and social science. So think about that as we go along in terms of who you're going to need to access in your lab. Think about the types of methods that you're going to have to use as you assess and analyze resilience. What are you going to need in terms of statistical support? What might you need in terms of different types of disciplines with respect to data collection? Those who may focus more on anthropological methods, for example, or those who may be very focused on quantitative survey methods. But think about, as we go along, and keep your themes in mind as we go through this discussion today, to think about what that's going to mean with respect to your lab activities, what you're going to need to do, and who you're going to need to have on your team at some level. We talked about the multidisciplinary issue. That includes methodological expertise in different domains, and probably And probably also it implies subject matter expertise in different areas. So keep those things in mind, because at the end of the day, what we talk about this morning will need to be translated into work plans, people, resources, perhaps software. Perhaps you don't possess the software that you need to do some of the analyses that you might think you want to do.